hypothetical that we get pretty often is how do I go from the crash to trial? I have been rolling around town. I'm in a car, I'm at a stoplight, I get rear-ended, and I've got bulged discs, I've got injuries. How do I go from that crash to trial? Welcome to the Biker Rebellion. I'm your host, Ginger, here with the founding member of the Biker Lawyers, Pete Lee.
So there are pretty much countless variations on how you can accomplish that journey. The best one, in my opinion, is to, once you get past the trauma and the immediate treatment part of it, is to get a lawyer, because that's just going to make the entire thing, A, faster, and B, less stressful. And let's talk about immediacy, because the biggest thing on most people's minds after a crash, other than their pain, is their medical bills.
Right.
How are these getting paid? I've got people hounding me for payment. I don't have the money to pay all this, even if they've got health insurance. I don't have the money to pay all this. What do I do?
Once you've hired a lawyer, what I tell people is if you've got medical creditors that are after you for bills that you can't pay, you need to tell me that, because I can write to them directly, tell them I represent Joe on this debt, and from this point forward, you can only contact me. That takes an enormous amount of stress off of people who are dealing with a huge pile of medical bills from a wreck. And I mean, if a medical creditor absolutely insists on filing a lawsuit to try to collect their money, I can't stop them from doing that. But what I can stop them from doing is having debt collectors call my clients, harass them, send them stuff in the mail. I can stop all that. And beyond that, the sooner you contact a lawyer, the sooner you're going to get a trial date, the sooner it's all going to be over.
Gotcha. So when these collectors, these creditors, they call and they're looking for their money, do you charge the client for that? You know, you're not an answering service of any kind, but you are their attorney in this case. So how do you handle that?
That's part of the service that we sign up for when we tell the client we're going to handle their case for a contingent fee or a percentage of the recovery. It's a part of the service, just like getting them their medical bills paid, getting them their loss of income paid. It's simply a part of the service. There is no charge for taking phone calls, handling with the debt collectors.
And when we're talking about these medical collectors that are potentially coming in, maybe they filed suit, maybe they have they've won their suit already. You know, like the client now owes this amount of money going into the trial still. What happens in those scenarios if the trial doesn't go favorably?
Well, the bottom line is the medical bills are the debt of the injured person unless they get a settlement or trial verdict saying that it's the other guy's responsibility. So if somebody goes to trial on a personal injury case with a bunch of medical bills and they lose, those bills are still their responsibility, which of course is another really compelling reason to get a lawyer on board as soon as possible, because there is so much that can be done. The earlier a lawyer's involved, the better, not only in keeping the timeline moving, but in making sure that things develop the way they should, that the proof you're going to need is there, because it's just people sometimes have a hard time understanding there are two parts to a personal injury lawsuit. One is liability, the other is damages. A lot of folks tend to think because they're in a crash and they've got all these medical bills that it's just a no-brainer that the bills are going to be paid, but it just doesn't work that way. Unless you line up your proof properly and show the insurance company that they're going to lose, they're not going to pay.
Not exactly the good neighbor we were all promised in various commercials.
Well, I mean, the insurance companies, as we've discussed on many occasions, their incentive is to protect money and to make a profit for their shareholders. What that doesn't mean is insurance companies aren't just going to step forward and start paying medical bills. They're going to make you prove your case.
The metaphor I've always heard for insurance companies, granted, you know, I'm a bit of a nerd, but it was Lord of the Rings, Smog. You know, it's the dragon sitting on a hoard of wealth saying,
well, if only everybody pays in, I'll certainly pay out at some point. If everybody just keeps paying in, I'll totally pay out if you need it.
And yet we end up having to fight the dragon to get any kind of payout in many instances.
In many instances, it's an understatement. It's damn near every time.
Gotcha.
It is super rare that somebody contacts me that has an offer from an insurance company on an injury case that I think is fair.
Gotcha. If we're in this hypothetical, I've been rear-ended, tons of damage, my back's just destroyed, right? We've talked about hiring an attorney. What happens if I just don't? What happens if I just say, screw it, I'm smart, I've got a college degree, I could go do whatever, I'll handle this, it's fine. What tends to happen in those situations?
The same thing that happens if I try to fix a complicated problem with my truck.
Gotcha.
It's not good.
Trying to do something you don't have expertise in doesn't always pan out very well.
Exactly. We all have things that we're good at and things we're not good at. And the big problem with trying to deal with your own personal injury case is you're dealing with somebody, the insurance adjuster, who is very good at what they do. And your chances of coming out looking good in that scenario are not good.
That makes sense. When going from like crash to trial, is there anything in general that just nuggets of wisdom, something to impart that needs to happen?
Again, to me, the most important thing is to get a lawsuit on file as soon as possible, because insurance companies tend to, not always, but they tend to play the delay game. They want to hang on to their money as long as they can. And if you don't file a lawsuit, you haven't given them a deadline. Once an insurance company has a deadline, then they tend to have their attention. They know that there's going to be a resolution date for this case, and they can't just string it out indefinitely. So the sooner you file your lawsuit, the sooner you have a trial date, the sooner you can back the insurance company up to a deadline where they have to make a decision.
And in a weird way, it's flipping deadlines, because you have a statute of limitations. So you have a deadline to actually file this case, and they know that. But the moment you file, now they have deadlines that they have to meet.
Think of it as seizing power against a very large and powerful adversary. By filing the lawsuit, the injured person seizes the power, and now they set the calendar, they set the tone, and they've taken that power away from the insurance company.
Fair enough. So when is too early to contact an attorney? Like, what's the earliest that you want to be contacted? When's the latest you want to be contacted in a case in order to take it and actually be able to help somebody?
In my opinion, it's never too early to get a lawyer involved in a personal injury lawsuit. I mean, I have literally been called by people to come to hospitals to sign up so I can get started on my work immediately. But in my opinion, there's really no good reason to let it go more than a month or two without involving a lawyer. Think of it as the longer it takes you to hire a lawyer, the longer that you let the insurance company set the agenda and dictate how things are going to happen.
And when's the latest that you'll get involved?
The closer you are to 2 years from the date of that wreck, the twitchier I get.
Sure.
I mean, I'll almost always consider taking a case, but let's just use a crazy scenario where the statute of limitations expires tomorrow.
Sure.
Boy, I'm going to be real slow to grab that case. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but what that means is you have to file a petition right now, today. You don't even have any time to think about it. You got to get together with the client right now, sign all the papers, prepare the petition, and get it on file. So the closer you are to the 2 years, the less likely that any lawyer is going to be willing to take the case, because part of taking a case means evaluating it. And once a lawyer files a lawsuit, that's a commitment that says, I'm going to stick with this thing. So you really want to have time to do enough investigation to figure out if the case is a solid case. So if somebody contacts me and they're bumping right up against the statute of limitations, I can't tell if it's a case that has merit or not. I'm going to turn the case down. Whereas if they had contacted me much earlier, I'm at least going to give the case a more thorough analysis.
Makes sense. Now, there are some other traps that can happen with taking a case late. Like, for instance, if you take the case and the statute is gone within a week or so, and then you have issues finding the defendant to serve, that can lead to another issue, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, filing the lawsuit stops the statute of limitations from running, but it doesn't mean that the danger is past. You still got to get the papers served on the defendant. And off the top of my head, I don't remember what the time period is. I want to say 180 days, but whatever the time period is, you got to make sure the papers get served within that period of time, because if they don't, then the court is going to end up throwing your lawsuit out basically for lack of prosecution. So that's yet another thing you got to do right away is you've identified the defendant because you've sued them, but you got to find them to serve the papers on them.
Gotcha. And are there any other pitfalls or traps that come with waiting to the last second to get an attorney involved?
Waiting till the last second to get a lawyer involved makes everything more complicated. I mean, if you've waited till the last second to get the lawyer involved, that means you're pushing up against the statute of limitations. That means that the injured person has made any number of decisions about how to handle their case for the last 2 years.
Right.
People don't have reason to know all the things that are really important with what should happen while a personal injury case is going on. So if they've made those decisions for 2 years, chances are some of the decisions fly in the face of what I would have done, and it just makes everything more difficult and more complex the longer somebody waits.
You could have scenarios where they were told to go get physical therapy and they go to like one session and then they're like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. And perhaps that would affect the value of their case. And if they had an attorney, perhaps they would have been advised to do something differently with regards to their medical care, their treatment. That's kind of what we're getting at.
Well, that's one of the things, and it's a good example because I can tell you, I just yesterday had a client contact me and said the doctor recommended physical therapy, and he didn't say anything about going, which, it's natural to assume they're gonna,
Right.
but I don't like to assume things like that because it's extremely important. So I immediately told him, you need to right away make your appointment with a physical therapist and you need to start going. If your doctor recommends physical therapy and you don't go, guess what that looks like?
Pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you're really not hurt. I mean, I have to assume you are if the doctor's recommending physical therapy, but still, if you don't go, it just opens the door for the insurance company or their lawyer to use it against you to make it look like you really weren't hurt, because if you were, you would have been going to physical therapy.
Why didn't you do your part in the recovery process?
Exactly.
Why didn't you mitigate the damage?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you're in a crash in the Midwest, give us a call for your free consultation. And until next time, speak truth to power. Brought to you by the Biker Lawyers. Injured? Ride with us.